Chapter 7. The Gates of a Universe. I think now that it was only that last jerking aside of the controls by Corus Khan that saved us from utter annihilation in that moment. For as he moved them, our ship swerved sidewise, not enough to avoid the collision, but enough to cause the onrushing ship to strike our own obliquely along the side instead of head-on. And it was that alone that saved us. The crash shook our great craft like a leaf in a gale, trembling and reeling there in the black gulf of space and flinging us all to the pilot room's floor. And for a moment it seemed to us that our ship had been riven apart. Then, as it steadied, we scrambled to our feet, just in time to see the ship that had crashed into us reeling away to the side, a shattered mass of metal, while down upon us from above and all about the other serpent ships were swooping. As Corus Khan sprang back to the controls, I leapt to the order tube, was on the point of shouting a command to our crew beneath, when down from the hovering ships above us, there dropped around us a dozen or more of great flexible ropes or loops of gleaming metal that encircled our ship like great snares. Within another instant, our craft had been drawn upward by them until it lay securely lashed between two of the enemy ships, our ray tubes useless now, since to loose them was but to perish with the ships that held us. Then another ship was slanting down above us, and as it hung over us, there projected downward from its lower space door toward our own upper space door a hollow tube of metal of the same diameter as the two space doors that attached itself with a click to our own upper door, forming a hermetically sealed gangway there between our two ships in space. Until that moment, we had stood motionless in amazement, somewhat stunned by the suddenness of our ship's capture. Then, as the space door of our ship clanged open above, I uttered a cry, sprang out into the corridor that ran the ship's length, and saw the members of our crew bursting into that corridor in answer to my cry. Even as from the space door chamber beside it, there writhed out a horde of scores of the serpent-creatures. Chuldeen and Corus Khan were beside me now, and with shouts of fierce anger, we rushed upon the masses of serpent-creatures who still were pouring down from the ship above through the hollow gangway. The melee that followed was wilder than when we ourselves had captured this same ship, since though we and all our crew flung ourselves forward upon the things without hesitation, we were weaponless and outnumbered by 10 to 1. As it was, I struck out with all my power at the hideous, writhing beings, feeling some of them collapse beneath my wild blows even as they strove to coil about me. Saw Corus Khan with his triple powerful metal arms, crushing the life from those who leapt upon him, cool and silent as ever, even in that wild din of battle. Glimpsed the great Spiken grasping those about him in his tremendous arms and literally tearing them into fragments as we battled on. But rapidly the members of our crew who battled about us were going down, the life crushed from them by the coiling bodies that overwhelmed us. And then as I strode on, I too was gripped from beneath by a serpent creature that had wound itself about my feet and now pulled me down. We were weaponless and outnumbered 10 to 1. Struggling in the grip of a half dozen of the alien creatures, I heard Chuldeen shouting hoarsely, saw him finally pulled from his feet also by a great mass of the writhing things. And then Corus Khan and the remainder of our crew were overcome too, and within another moment, all was over. Scores of the serpent creatures lay dead about us, but with them lay many of our own crew. Not more than a bare score were left to us now of all our party. Gripped tightly still by the serpent creatures, we were thrust down a narrow stair and into an empty little storeroom beneath the pilot room, in its metal walls but a single space window giving a view forward. The door snapped shut as the last of us were thrust inside, and then our captors had left us. The lashings that had snared our ship were cast loose by the ships on either side, and as the humming of the generators waxed loud again, our ship and those about it began to move once more through space. "They're heading now toward the dying universe," exclaimed Corus Khan, gazing through the single window into the black gulf outside. "They're going to take us there as prisoners." But I too, gazing through the window at his side, had seen that our ship's prow was turning now toward the right, so that ahead now, instead of the great glowing mass of the Andromeda universe, There lay the dim, faintly glowing patch of light that was the Serpent People's waning universe. Toward it now, our ship and the ships about us were flashing at greater and greater speed, and as they hummed on, the despair that had already gripped me deepened. It was not the peril in which we ourselves lay that affected me, for well I knew that from the moment of our capture, our fate had been sealed, and that our temporary reprieve from death meant only that some more horrible fate awaited us in the dying universe. It was that the last chance of our own universe had vanished with our capture, the last hope to summon from the Andromeda universe the help that could save our galaxy gone now forever. In a silence of utter despair, I gazed ahead as our ship and those about it hummed on, while Juldeen and Chorus Khan and all the survivors of our crew prisoned with us maintained the same despairing silence. There was no plan for escape, no suggestion of it, even for well we knew the impossibility of even winning clear of the room that was our prison, not to speak of overcoming the hordes of serpent creatures who now operated our ship. In a strange apathy of spirit, we sat and stood, hour after hour, speaking little. Our eyes and minds turned only to the window through which we could see, in the black abyss of space ahead, the faintly glowing universe of the Serpent People, broadening slowly ahead as our ships raced on at full speed toward it. A day passed, and that dying universe had grown across a full third of the vault of space before us. A great, dim glowing region of flickering luminescence, utterly different from the radiance of the shining Andromeda universe that lay now far to our left. On and on the serpent ships raced, unceasingly, hour upon hour, until at last, on the third day of our imprisonment, their speed began to slacken. The drone of the great generators falling a little in pitch as they drew near at last to their galaxy, that had expanded outward now until it seemed to fill all the heavens before us. So strange a spectacle to our eyes that almost we forgot our own predicament in despair and contemplation of it. Full in the heavens before us it lay, a mighty galaxy fully as large as our own, as the Andromeda universe, but infinitely different, a galaxy not of life but of death. In all its mighty mass were no flaming white or blue or yellow suns like those of our own galaxy, no brilliant young stars surrounded by circling, sun-warmed worlds. Here was only a vast forest of dead and dying suns stretched across the heavens, huge throngs of dark, burned-out stars, cold and black and barren, that crowded thick upon one another, with here and there a few dying suns of dark, smoky red, somber crimson stars in the last stages of stellar evolution. It was with the light of these few alone that the great mass faintly glowed, an expiring universe in which all light and life were sinking into darkness and death. Silent with awe and wonder, we watched as our ships drove in toward this darkening galaxy. And then I began to make out, between us and it, a strange constant flicker of blue light that seemed to extend all about the faint glowing universe before us. Stronger that flicker was growing as we sped on toward it, though through it there shone clearly as ever the light of the crimson suns beyond it. At last we seemed racing straight into it, and now I saw that it was a colossal globular shell of flickering blue light, almost invisible, that enclosed within itself all the mighty circular mass of the dying universe before us. Our ships seemed about to flash straight into it, but now turned sharply to the left, speeding along the great light barrier's edge. A ship beside us, though, had turned a little too late and had struck the light wall while turning. And as it did so, I saw it rebounding back with terrific force, as though in collision with a solid wall, its whole prow crumpled by the impact. Then, at last, I comprehended the nature of this vast shell of flickering blue light that enclosed the dying universe. "It's a vibration wall," I cried to my companions. "A great wall of etheric vibrations enclosing all this universe." For I saw now that that was the Great Barrier's nature. It was a mighty shell of perpetual vibrations in the ether itself, extending all about the universe before us, allowing light and electromagnetic communication waves to pass through it, unchanged, but excluding and holding out the vibrations of matter. By meeting them, as I knew must be the case, with a vibration of equal frequency which opposed them, reflected them back, forming a barrier more impenetrable than any of solid matter, yet one all but invisible, extending about all this mighty universe, excluding from it for all time all matter from outside. 2. As I was later to learn, the great vibration wall was impenetrable to the heat vibrations, reflecting those of its dying suns that struck it back into the universe inside. It was for this purpose that the vast barrier had been erected, as the sons of the serpent people failed, to prevent the escape of any of the precious heat radiations of their few living sons, and also to place about all their universe a wall impenetrable to all invaders. Set in the ether about their universe eons before, the vibrations that made up the Great Barrier were perpetual and undying, a vast wall of defense about the serpent universe. We were flashing close along the mighty, flickering barrier's edge now, and the speed of our ships slackened swiftly as there loomed far ahead in space 2 great, dark bulks starred here and there with points of white light. Moments more, and they had grown to immense size as we neared them. And now we saw that these were mighty, square-walled structures of gleaming metal, each a full 5,000 feet in length along each of its 4 sides, and half again that much in height. 2 colossal metal forts that floated motionless there in space, set directly in the great wall of flickering blue vibrations, and between which there was a great opening in that wall, a clear space in which was no flickering barrier, and which I divined was the single opening in all the great wall. And flanking that opening on either side hung the massive metal structures, upheld there in the void, as I guessed, by mighty generators like those of our own ships. Castles of metal whose countless deadly death beam tubes commanded the opening between them, and from whose white-lit windows the serpent garrisons of them gazed out upon us. Great space forts, hung there at the vibration wall's one opening, guarding the gates of a universe. In toward the narrow opening between the great forts swept our ships, and as they moved slowly inward, there flashed a challenging signal of lights from those forts, answered at once by similar signals from our ships. Then we were driving inward between the towering metal castles on either side, flashing in through the great vibration wall and into the dying galaxy itself. With generators again humming at high speed, our half-hundred ships swept on into the thronging thousands of dead and dying suns that swarmed before us, inside the colossal protecting shell of the great vibration wall. All about us now were great hordes of swarming dark stars that we could but dimly glimpse as our ships flashed between them, vast throngs of black and burned-out suns that outnumbered the few still flaming stars by hundreds to one. Here and there about us, though, as we swept on, we could make out a red sun or two, some comparatively brilliant and others so dark and far gone that they seemed only like giant cooling embers in the black heavens. Clusters there were, too, of which all but 1 or 2 suns would be black and dead. And as we flashed on into the depths of this universe, we began to realize at last what tremendous necessity it had been that had sent the serpent peoples driving out through the limitless void in search of a new universe. Far ahead, though, there loomed before us as we sped on a trio of giant crimson suns, more brilliant than any we had yet seen in this dying universe, and which hung at its center, each of them as large as great Canopus itself in our own galaxy. In a great triangle they hung there, 2 of them much brighter than the other, a mighty triplet of titanic waning suns that seemed like the dying monarchs of the vast and dying realm about them. It was down toward these 3 great suns that our ships were slanting now, down toward the space at the center of their great triangle. And now we saw that in that space there swung a single mighty world, a dark, immense planet of size, inconceivable, almost as large as the 3 great suns at whose center it turned, and whose light and heat fell perpetually upon it. Broader and broader the great turning world was growing as we slanted down toward it, until it lay like a tremendous dark shield beneath us, filling all the heavens below. As our ships sank still lower toward it, speed swiftly slackening, we began to make out details on its surface, to make out what seemed to be a vast mass of palely shining structures Towers and walls and vast, terraced buildings that glowed all with pale blue light, indescribably ghostly in appearance as they soared into the dusky, crimson light of the three encircling suns. Here and there through the masses of these blue shining structures ran streets, narrow openings in which swarmed great masses of the writhing serpent people. And as I gazed down upon this tremendous city, upon the countless glowing structures of pale blue light that made it up, my astonishment at what I saw broke from me in a startled cry. "This city," I exclaimed, "its buildings are of vibrations like the Great Wall around their universe. A city of vibrations, a mighty city that covered apparently all this giant planet, and yet whose every structure was built not of matter, but of etheric vibrations that were matter-resistant like the Great Wall, vibrations infinitely more lasting and impenetrable than any matter, and projected upward at will into buildings of any shape or size. Here and there in the mighty city, even as we sped down over it, we could see buildings vanishing instantaneously, could see other mighty buildings springing as instantly into being, all of the same pale blue light, reared or destroyed instantly by snapping on or off the vibrations that were projected upward to form them. Now as our ship slanted down over the vast mass of pale glowing structures that stretched from horizon to horizon, I saw that ahead and beneath there lay amid those structures a mighty circular clearing, scores of miles in diameter and paved smoothly with the same pale blue force as the city's buildings and streets. In this vast circle, ranged regularly in long rows, rested thousands upon countless thousands of gleaming oval spaceships in all stages of completion. Over and among them, swarming ceaselessly through them and toiling to complete them, moved mighty hordes of the serpent-creatures, armed with great tools of strange design, the thunderous clamor of their work coming up to us through the great planet's air. It was the immense workshop of the serpent races that lay beneath us. I knew in which their hordes labored ceaselessly to complete the mighty fleet that was to carry them through the void to our universe. It was not the ranks of half-built ships, though, nor the toiling throngs among them that held our gaze in the vast circular clearing over which we were racing. It was the colossal shape that loomed at that clearing center and that occupied fully half the area of its vast circle, a stupendous metal cone structure that rose in the air before us for fully a score of miles, the diameter of its base almost as great, a gigantic, smooth-sided mountain of metal, towering there above the countless ships and workers in the great clearing around it, and above the far-stretching city about that clearing. Past its side our ships were speeding, and we could see now that about it and upon it there labored other great masses of serpent creatures, swarming in and out of the heavy doors that swung open in its sides at various levels, and laboring upon the great masses of machinery that we could glimpse inside. Some of these we saw were great generators like those of our ships, making it clear that the vast cone was intended to race through space. Then, as Koros Khan's keen eyes peered toward and into its interior as we flashed past, he turned toward us, startled. "It's a colossal death beam projector," he exclaimed. "One that can move through space like their ships, and that can stab forth a death beam of unthinkable size. With that, when they complete it, they can wipe out all life on a whole world with a single flash of the stupendous beam." Stunned, we gazed toward it as our ships flashed past. The tremendous cone itself was apparently complete, from vast base to the truncated, flattened tip. The generators that were to move it through space were apparently all installed, and the great hordes of serpent workers who swarmed in it now were beginning to place in it the massed mechanisms for the production of the colossal death beam, which would be projected up through a tremendous hollow tube or tunnel running up from the great cone's interior to the great round opening at its truncated tip. The terrific beam generated in that interior would flash out of that opening at the top in whatever direction the vast cone itself was headed in space, would flash through space with its tremendous power for immense distances, spreading out fan-wise and expanding in every direction as it flashed on, until it struck the planet at which it was aimed, enveloping all that planet in its ghostly glow and wiping out instantly all life upon it. This then was the great weapon of irresistible power which the captured records of the serpent creatures had mentioned. And irresistible it was, I saw now. For with it, when completed, the serpent creatures could sally forth, and with one sweep of the colossal beam, destroy all fleets of spaceships opposing them by annihilating their crews, could descend upon our universe, and with that same great beam, wipe out all life upon world after world of our galaxy, swiftly, resistlessly, until in all our universe was left no living thing except themselves. But now, even as we stared in horror and amazement at the vast cone, our ships were driving past it, still over the great clearing filled with close-ranked masses of the half-built ships, until before and beneath us lay the mighty circle's edge. And now we saw that beyond it, touching it, there lay another smaller circle of clear space, amid the vast city's crowding structures of blue light, a circle from which throngs of spaceships were constantly rising, and upon which others were descending, it being obviously one of the points of departure and arrival for all ships. Down toward it, our own ships were speeding, slower with every moment, until at last they had landed at the smaller circle's edge, our own closest to that edge, the pale glowing mighty buildings towering up just beside us. Then the space doors of our ships were clanging open, and their occupants were writhing forth from them. A moment and the door of our prison snapped open, then herded forward by a half-dozen of serpent creatures armed with small death-beam tubes, we were marched out of the ship and onto the smooth pavement of blue force that covered this circle also. There, massed together, we were halted for a moment and took the opportunity to stare about. From the ships behind us, just landed, the last of the serpent crews had writhed forth, passing across to a narrow street that opened through the mass of towering, shimmering buildings before us, from the circular clearing's edge. We ourselves were being marched toward that street now, the great oval ships lying empty and deserted behind us. And at sight of their open doors, I turned and twitched the arm of Dean, walking beside me. "It's a chance in a million to get away," I whispered to him and to Corus Khan. "If we can overpower these guards and get back inside our ship." They turned toward me, startled, and then as they glanced back toward the deserted ships, their eyes lit with excitement. A moment more and I had whispered my plan, glancing toward the half-dozen guards behind us, and then the next moment we put it into effect. Dean suddenly slumping to the blue force pavement and lying motionless, sprawled as though suddenly stricken down. It was the most primitive of ruses, and I could only hope in that moment that our guards might not have had experience of it. The next moment, though, they had seen the motionless form of the big Spiken, and with a natural perplexity had writhed forward toward it, holding their beam tubes, though gripped in the coils of their strange bodies, alertly toward ourselves. Beside the big crustacean, they halted, tubes trained still upon us as they inspected him. Then the next moment, the Spiken had reached out his great arms with inconceivable swiftness and suddenness, grasping the serpent guards beside him before they could turn their tubes down upon him, threshing with them in sudden fierce battle as we rushed forward to aid him. The next moment we were all struggling there, with those guards in a wild melee, their deadly tubes knocked from their grasp by Dean in his leap upon them. With the strength and fury of despair, we flung ourselves upon them, rending their writhing bodies to fragments as they sought to coil about us, our hoarse shouts rising above their own hissing cries of fear and alarm. In but a moment, it seemed, we were crushing the last of them beneath us, Dean and one or two of our crew leaping already toward the open door of our ship, while we staggered up to follow. But as we did so, there came from behind us other hissing cries, and we whirled about, then stopped short. For back from the street into which they had just gone were rushing the serpent crews of the ships behind us, a resistless horde that was flashing upon us with the ghostly death beams of their tubes stabbing full toward us.